He's in a tier of his own for me, tier 2, and also tier of being Godzilla or an alien or whatever it is. I mean, obviously a fascinating player, and maybe a player that, as the draft media has gone maybe too far one way with, because there are still things to clean up. But there's just not a lot of guys that are 6'4", 244, that run 4.43, that jump over 40 inches. Everybody knows all of that. He's 20 years old. I mean, the closest thing I can come up with, Trevor, is, Wyoming Josh Allen. I don't like it's really hard to draw up a comparison to Anthony Richardson that you feel so confident is, spot on. Mm-hmm. But I think that development arc will have to be the same for him. He finished 2022 with 17 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He had 19 big-time throws. Keep in mind, Levis had 7. Richardson had 19. He only completed 53% of his passes. 14 of his passes were dropped. Over 700 rushing yards and 9 rushing touchdowns. He'll be 20 years old on draft night. Huge frame, power arm without limitations. Extremely tough to bring down when scrambling to extend passing plays. Can often fall forward on designed runs. Extremely comfortable throwing intermediate range of 10 to 19 yards, where in 2022 he was 53 for 87 and averaged over 10 yards per attempt. Mm-hmm. Guys, people win in the NFL at the quarterback position from consistently hitting the 10 to 19 yard throws. You love the deep ball. You love the highlights. You love the ball security in the short range. If you can carve a team up in the 10 to 19, you're in a really good place. And Richardson is already there. 93.1 passing grade per PFF when throwing deep, 20 plus yards. Finished the season 26 for 64 with a 15.6 YPA, 9 touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions in that range. Immense struggles on short throws. 58% completion rate on 88 attempts, 4 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. It's bizarre. It's really bizarre. The good news is that's the easiest thing to get better at. Mm. The bad news is you can't survive as a starter over a 17-plus game season by being that inconsistent in the short area throws. You will kill drives by doing that. So that is the wild runaround on Anthony Richardson. I put his delivery on those short throws lacks consistency. Yeah. Like when he has the deeper stuff, Trevor, it's like, all right, I'm setting up and like, this is who I am. Like I'm an RPG on my shoulder and it's good. And I shouldn't say RPG. It's a lock-on bazooka. Mm-hmm. But the short stuff, it's like, yeah, we're just out here. Like, and it's like, no, lock in the same way and you'll be almost not a perfect quarterback, but even better. He gets fixated on one route sometimes. He'll stare too long. When he misses high, he doesn't set his base. Just mechanic rep after rep. And here's the thing, guys. He has not played a lot of football in college. Mm-hmm. So there's a reason that there's not the same consistent. He's not 6 years like Hendon Hooker. He's not this multi-year starter like all of these guys. And the last thing I wrote is he's not just a power thrower. He dropped it in the bucket plenty of times, but he just needs to find consistency there. So I am... There's no way of saying you're risk averse at quarterback because in this world you have to be. But I definitely am a doubter at quarterback more often than not. And it's bitten me. I was too low on Josh Allen. I was too low on Justin Herbert. I'm betting on this guy. I really am. Like it's just the floor is high because of the running. Mm-hmm. But the floor is not as low as a thrower as people think. It's really not. And I would take him in the top 3 and be really excited about it.
I was so close to putting him in tier 1.
And the way I talked about it, you think he would be, but the tier 1 guys will get, they're just so good.
I think 2 days ago, before I really kind of went over the list and wanted to comb things out and kind of organize it, I had him in tier 1 with the other 2 quarterbacks that we're going to talk about. The tempting thing about Anthony Richardson are that his struggles are all correctable. They really are. All the shit that you can't teach these quarterbacks to play at the highest level, he has. The rushing ability, the broken tackles. Dude, he had a 0.40 missed tackles force rate. Nuts. The long runs, the short runs, the ability to extend plays, the understanding of when to slide, when to not. I mean, even that, it's not perfect, but it's more advanced than you would think for him only being a 1-year starter. He is so incredibly talented. And I'll tell you this too. There are a lot of yes, the accuracy needs work. I'm again not forgiving that. I'm not saying that he's totally fine. He's going to be good to go. It's not an issue. Florida's wide receivers were not good last year, and I think a lot of the glaring easy throws that you would see people post clips of are like, for example, like a 3-step drop into a quick slant. And I watched, even just in the 5 games that I watched of him, that happened 3 times. All 3 times that was on the wide receiver. But people, I don't think people would realize that. Instead, they just go, wow, he missed a slant. That's not good. You got to realize, like, slant routes are timing routes. He hikes the ball. He has a 3-step drop. That 3rd foot's in the ground. That ball's coming out. And either the wide receiver is where they need to be, or that ball's going to go incomplete and we're going to live the fight another day. Whatever. We're just going to go on to the next play. And all 3 times, his wide receivers, I watched this, did not get off press quick enough and did not hit the slant.
I've seen it with my eyes
on at the timing that they needed to. I've watched these plays, and yet Richardson, most of the time, would get blamed for that because they just go, "Oh man, how'd you miss that one? That was an easy one." All of those things, I think, are correctable. His throwing motion's weird. It's a little bit loopy at times. Like sometimes it could be high, it could be super quick, it could be snappy. You could love the drop back, you could love the footwork. A lot of times it does line up, but there are other times when sometimes he'll loop the ball a little bit more than he needs to. And another thing is that he sidearms it a little too much for my taste. Instead of that ball coming straight over and you following through with the thumb in the opposite pocket right across your chest, he follows through, but that ball's getting released almost like out further by like past where the shoulder, much past where the shoulder is. And I think that's where you see the accuracy issues, because when he's got to put his foot in the ground and put pace on the ball, like you said, he's more comfortable with it with this throwing motion. But when he's got to take some off of it, that's when the inconsistency of that motion shows up, because it's too inaccurate. It's not going where it needs to. It's not leading the guy where he needs to go. Sometimes he's trying to force it in a tight window or get a quick throw off and the defender gets it. But I think we got to clean up the throwing motion a little bit. I think it's got to be a little bit higher, a little bit closer towards the shoulder, less loopy, less of a sidearm motion. But when you do that, I think that he's got the ability to figure it out. The rest of the fundamentals are there for him. So, everybody out there, we don't need to highlight the ceiling of him and the highs, the talent, because everybody has seen it. It's been well talked about. But the concerns about him come with the accuracy and the consistency. And I think all those things are justifiable. And there's reason to believe that this dude's going to be incredible at the NFL level. Might take a little bit of time. And like we talked about before on this podcast, when you start young quarterbacks that need some time to develop, it's about 2 things. 2 things make or break these guys that have all the talent in the world to make it. Not developing bad habits when you start to struggle, and not getting your confidence broken. Those 2 things. That is why Josh Allen succeeded. That is why a wildly inconsistent quarterback that came out of Wyoming was able to make it where we are now, where this guy's an MVP candidate and has Buffalo on a Super Bowl trajectory and a Super Bowl potential every single year. Because in the 2 years that he struggled in the NFL, 1, they let him, right? They weren't like, we're gonna yank this guy, get a different quarterback in here. They let him struggle, but they didn't allow him to develop some really bad habits, and they didn't let his confidence get broken. That's why Josh Allen made it. If you give Anthony Richardson that kind of environment, I think that he can even start year 1 in some situations, and it can work out, even though I would love for him to sit behind a veteran. I think that that's a great route as well. So those are my overall thoughts on Anthony Richardson. I was very close, like I said, to having him in tier 1. This is a quarterback that you draft in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, I still have him as my 13th overall player. So and you factor in the quarterback scale, like absolutely. And it goes down development, player development, and maybe just him getting to watch a pro operate in practice or whatever it may be. It can make him a totally different player in another year because he's so young.
Oh, I wanted to say these 2 things too. 1, for as good as he is as a rusher, he does not have a first read and bail nearly as much as you think that he would. He is genuinely going through progressions for as long as he feels like he can before he really extends that play with
his legs. He can run more.
He could
run more.
And people would say, look at his rushing ability and be like, you should run more. But I'm saying it's not this crutch for him. You're not like trying to fix that bad habit of like, oh, one read, then I'm going to tuck it. That's not where Anthony Richardson is. So don't think that about him at all. And then the last thing that I want to say before we can move on, Connor, I really like to watch guys in succession. I like to watch the early games in the season, go to a mid game in the season, end of the season, because you can physically see guys get better if they're getting better, or get worse if they're getting worse, or not getting any better if they're not getting any better. But you never know unless you really watch these games in order. So don't always just pick I wanted to see him against, the best competition and they played this team week 8. I would encourage you to go watch an early game first before you watch that game, because of the turnover worthy plays that Anthony Richardson had, 9 of his 13 turnover worthy plays came within weeks 1 to 6. From week 7 on, he only had 4 turnover worthy plays. And I believe that's either 6 or 7 games. That is a sign of progression. A lot of those really bad looking turnover worthy plays happened in the first 6 weeks of him being a starter at the college football level. And from week 7 on, he only had 4 turnover-worthy plays against some pretty dang good opponents. So
it's a great point. It was something that headlined my notes, is just how much better he got as the season went on. And that's highly, highly encouraging to any evaluator in that space.